Today, we're here on Chess Reps and we're learning the Vienna. This is an opening that you absolutely have to know. If you're a beginner, if you're an advanced player, doesn't matter. You need to know this opening and you could gain hundreds of ELO points if you actually learn it. If you want to check out this course for yourself, click the link in the description or in the pinned comment below. Let's get to it. So the first move of the Vienna, of course, is e4. We push our pawn, and this is important as well. In order to play the Vienna, your opponent has to play e5. If they don't play e5, it's a different opening. You have to play something else, okay? Don't just pre-move these first two moves. But the next move is knight c3. Now this makes it a Vienna. The most popular response is when black brings out the knight to f6. And now if they do that, we can play this. This will be the first half of this video, will be the Vienna Gambit. Then we'll move on to the Vienna Game if they don't play into the Gambit. But the Vienna Gambit happens in this position. On move 3, we play f4. The thing about the Vienna that's so good is that this move right here, black should just get a shovel and start digging their own grave because white has this crushing move with e5. And if you notice, black's knight actually has to retreat. It has no safe squares moving forward. And now we bring out our knights and we just take control of the entire center. And now, of course, we could take back the pawn. And if they take back in the center, we take back with our knight. And then we take back with our bishop. And just like that, white is in a great position. It's already 1.4. Black's pieces are not developed. White has great center control. Let's continue. So again, e4 is the move, knight c3. If our opponent plays knight f6, then we play f4. Now our opponent has denied the gambit, but still, no worries. Just develop the knight. Now our opponent has taken, but this is bad. Because whenever your opponent takes that pawn, you can take over the center, and d4 is a very, very good move, and that bishop usually can take back that pawn on f4 just because it's a very nice developing move for the bishop, and that pawn is very difficult to defend for black. So we move forward with e4, bring out our knight, play the Vienna Gambit. Now our opponent takes, so remember the move is e5. Our opponent now, and this is the idea, black's knight has to retreat because if they move to the edge of the board, the queen covers that square. So that's why the knight has to retreat back to g8 and why e5 is such a good move. All right, let's play the Vienna. Again, playing the Vienna Gambit, our opponent has played into it, so we can play f4. Our opponent has declined it though, so now we just develop our knight like usual. And when this knight goes to c6, we can quickly develop our bishop and pin the knight to the king. Not a crushing position for us, but a very pleasant one. And after moves like d3 and castling, we have a great position. So even if they don't fall for any of the traps, you still have a very pleasant position, and that's why it's so good as well. It's not like you're taking any enormous risks to get such a good position, and black can play into this very, very often. Our opponent retreats, and of course we develop the knight. And now we see g5. So this is an idea where black is trying to hang on to that f pawn. But again, it doesn't really work. It's an idea that you often see in the King's Gambit, but of course this isn't the King's Gambit, this is the Vienna Gambit. And instead, we can just take over control of the entire center. If our opponent just starts pushing pawns, we can retreat the knight. It doesn't matter. We have great control over the center and we will likely win. Let's continue. So now we develop our knight and we play f4. Now our opponent makes another inaccuracy. This move seems completely natural for black. Oh, their pawn's under attack? Okay, well, I'll defend. But it's not so easy because after we take, we can play d4. Black's knight has to go back, and now we have e5. Now, you can see how we've taken control of the center. Black's knights have to move back. We get development with tempo, and we just have, yet again, another crushing position out of seemingly nothing. This seems normal, but yet it just falls apart, and it's phenomenal for white. We play the Vienna Gambit yet again. Our opponent goes into it, so how do we punish? Our opponent has played queen to e7. So the idea of this move, of course, is to pin our pawn to our king. For instance, we can't take the knight because if we did, we would lose our king. So the idea is to unpin with queen to e2. We can develop our knight, And now we can play the very nice move, knight to d5, attacking the queen. If their queen steps forward, we have this three-way fork between the rook, the king, and the queen. And yeah, as you can see, 7.1 on the elo bar, it's just over. So if black tries any tricks, just doesn't work out for black. And now we push e5 yet again. Their knight goes back, we develop, we play d4, we take control of the center, and now we have a different idea. In a line earlier, we saw when they developed the knight forward, but this time they haven't. So what we can do is take advantage and pin black's pawn to their king with queen to e2. Now this move does not defend black's pawn, so we can take it and simply develop our bishop. This is a very common idea where you bring out the bishop to f4, taking that pawn with development, and then you can just look at this position. Only 2 of black's pieces are out. It's not good at all. We play e4, we play knight c3, and we play f4. Our opponent, yet again, decides to take this pawn, which is not a good idea. We know the moves so far. We know the move is d4. We just saw this. Remember, queen to e2. And now our opponent has gone for something a little bit different. But this time, it doesn't matter because what we can do is take the pawn. That's not an obvious move, but if you remind yourself of the concept of why you would play queen e2 first, you just got to think that black pawn is pinned. It can't take my bishop if I were to take this pawn. And we keep it going. You can see how things can really fall apart for black so quickly if they just play that move. And it's so natural. They just want to play it, man. Okay, remember the move here. Queen to e2. If they pin, we undo the pin. Now we bring out our knight. And now we play this move again. Knight to d5. And it doesn't matter if black doesn't go into the fork or tries to protect the c7 pawn, because we can just take it anyways. It doesn't matter because we have this insane discovered check where we take with the pawn. And now black's queen, in desperation, tries to defend, but it doesn't matter because we can just take with a pawn. It's absolutely brutal. So black really can't take this pawn, and we'll show in a line later exactly what black's best move is. It's actually to play d5 and not take the pawn. But now, queen to e2, we've seen this before. We bring out our knight, and now we continue to do this with d4. We see whenever that pawn moves, we can bring our knight to d5. Yet again, it doesn't matter where black's queen moves to because we still have this idea where we take the pawn and we take the queen. There's no safe spot for that queen. And now we continue. We continue with f4, and this is the best move. This is black's best move against the Vienna Gambit. So if you're playing as black, this is imperative. You need to know this move. It has to be d5. But again, for white, it's not bad. And it's still, as you can see, completely even. So what we do first is very important. We take their e-pawn with our f-pawn. And then after this move, there are multiple moves here. One move would be knight to f3, but the better move and the more popular move as of recently is to bring your queen out to f3. Now we take back, we take towards the center, we play d4, and now we can play some simple developing moves. Obviously bishop to d3 is classic. Knight to e2 is very simple. We can castle. And again, yet even though they did not fall for our tricks, we still have a very, very comfortable position. And that is again why the Vienna is so good and why you need to know it. e4, knight to c3, Vienna Gambit. We push. We bring out the knight. Now we play d4, and now we play this nice move, queen to e2. We remember this. So the pin is undone. However, again, this pawn is not protected, so we can take. And now simply we take with bishop to f4. Yet again, simple. Ideas we've already seen. You can play them if black does not play accurately. All right, let's keep it going. The Vienna Gambit. Here we go. e5. Bring out our knight. We know the move is d4. We know the move is queen e2. We know we can take. Perfect. Now a different move. Their knight is attacking our queen. Now on first instinct, you might think, let's drop our queen back. Let's take the pawn on f4, which is not a terrible move, but there is a better option because we want to develop our pieces. And the best way to do that while protecting our queen is this nice bishop to b5 idea, pinning the knight to the king. Now black undoes the pin, so now black's knight could take our queen on the next move, so let's just take. And now we have a very nice move with d5. Pushing the bishop back, and now we can take. So there it is. That is the Vienna Gambit. There are so many ways that you can punish black for playing inaccurately. And even if they do play accurately, you still have a great position. And that's the beauty of it. Now we're going to go to the Vienna Game. This is where black doesn't play into the Vienna Gambit, but instead they play some different moves, and white can still have a very nice position. Welcome to the Vienna Game. It starts just the same with the same first two moves. First, we play e4. And again, black has to play e5. You can't play the Vienna if black does not play e5. And then you bring out your knight to c3. Now black has played the max long defense, whatever it's called. And the best move for white is bishop to c4. Now this is a very important move. Black brings out their bishop to c5. And when you have this kind of symmetrical, goofy position, you have to remember the key move here. As you can see, it's queen to g4. It attacks that g7 pawn, so black pushes it up a square. But again, it doesn't matter. We can threaten checkmate by dropping our queen back. If black brings their queen out, then we can attack it with knight to d5. If they trade, they just help us develop. And just like that, we have a great position. But black can make a mistake very early in this game. And if you see it, you could get checkmate very fast. Now, knight to f6 is a very nice move. And if black's king retreats the wrong way, you have mate in one with bishop to h6. Absolutely brutal. You might be able to get this in a game if black doesn't play accurately. We play the Vienna. Our opponent, yet again, plays knight to c6. So we know the best move is bishop to c4. Now our opponent has gone for something a little bit different here. They developed their knight instead, but no worries. All we do is play d3, add some extra support to that e-pawn, and now black pins our knight to our king. We can develop our knight to e2. The reason why we develop it to e2 is so that in the future, we might still have ideas of playing f4. Not yet though. Instead, we will castle. And f4 might be an idea to play in the future, which is why the knight is a little bit better on e2 in this position. You know the drill. We play e4, we play knight to c3. When their knight goes to c6, we play bishop to c4. And now we know the move is d3. All right, now their bishop develops to c5. And the idea, of course, is to push the pawn to f4. Now we can take back with development with our bishop. Now if they castle kingside, we could be a bit aggressive if we decide we can develop our queen and castle queenside. And then just throw these pawns up the board and attack. Good luck, because yeah, it is going to be a bloodbath for sure. e4, knight to c3, bishop to c4. And now remember the move here. The right move is queen to g4, attacking that g7 square. Now, black is, of course, trying to checkmate our king. But what they realize is that they actually can't. This is a common idea where you can checkmate the opponent's king on f2. But in this position, it doesn't work. And white's pieces actually cover all of the squares. So instead, we have this nice idea where we can bring our knight forward. And now, if they try to checkmate us, our king has a safe square on d1 because we moved our queen. And of course, if they are going to blunder this, then you can take back with the bishop. e4, knight to c3. We bring our bishop out. We know after this move, the move is d3. And now remember, when the bishop goes to b4, we want to protect that knight. So we go knight to e2. Now our opponent has gone and struck back in the center with the pawn, but fear not, we can take back with our pawn. If their knight takes, we should castle, undoing the pin. And don't worry, even though we double our pawns, we kick out the bishop. And now we can rotate our knight to g3. And as you can see, a very pleasant position. Onward we go. e4, knight to c3, we know the move. And now queen g4, don't forget it, very important move. And now we bring our knight forward. Remember, there's no checkmate, don't worry. We always have d1 as an escape square. And now we have to be a little bit careful because with d6, their bishop attacks our queen. So don't just go straight in and fork the king and the rook because that would be very, very bad. So instead what we should do is take the pawn on g7. Remember, moving to g4 attacks that weak g7 pawn. So now we take, and now we have this very nice idea where we can fork the king and the rook, and it works here. And now you might think we could take the rook, but instead we do have a better idea, because if we were to take the rook, then all of a sudden our queen is quite trapped and our knight will fall. So it's a better move if we take the bishop with our knight, and although we can't take their rook, we can probably take their king very soon in this position. Bring out your knight, kick out their queen, and just like that, we have a very, very nice position. So a few tactical ideas there that you have to be aware of, and take a second and try to remember exactly what ideas you want to go for, because oftentimes with that rook trapped in the corner, you can always get it later or threaten something much more valuable. So we have this idea again with queen to g4. Our opponent goes for this idea yet again, knight to d5. We don't care. Our king is safe. And now, again, this move threatens to take our queen, but we have queen to g7. And now our opponent has gone for an attack, but it's not going to work. So first, we do need to protect our king. So the best move here is knight to e2. Just giving ourselves just a little bit of protection. Black's attack is over. The rook hangs in the corner. It's dead to rights. Let's continue. Now we bring our knight out to c3. We bring our bishop out. And remember, the move here is d3. And now we have f4, just like before. And now we bring our knight out to f3. Simple development. Now this is a different move where their bishop pins our knight to our queen. So instead, and of course we can't castle because black's bishop guards the g1 square. So the best move is to chase out that bishop with knight to a4. And now we can just take the bishop. The bishop has no other safe squares. c3 is always a nice move in this position to prevent the knight from going either to b4 or to d4. And now we can castle. So that's also an idea, of course, to win that bishop and double black's pawns so that we can castle kingside. Let's continue. e4, knight to c3, bishop comes out, queen to g4. Now their opponent blocks with g6, so we know the best move is to bring our queen back to f3, threatening checkmate. Our opponent brings their knight out and prevents checkmate. So now what we need to do is our queen is quite vulnerable on f3, and you remember when their queen is on f6, we often have knight to d5. But what we should do in this position is prevent black from bringing their knight to d4. So what we're going to do is bring our knight to e2, preventing their knight from jumping in and attacking our queen. Now we play d3, and now we have a very, very nice move here. The key move here is bishop to g5. And in this position, that pin against that knight, which is only defended once by the queen, is very, very fragile. We bring our knight forward, and just like this, everything falls apart. Now the best move here, you got to calculate a little bit, is to take with the bishop because it's check, and now we can win with their bishop, their queen's hanging, and of course we're in a completely devastatingly winning position. So yet again, the dangers of the Vienna shine through, and that's why it's actually very important to know what the best moves are for black. In this position, after queen to g4, the best move for black is actually to bring the king to f8, guarding that g7 square, which is very, very awkward. But instead, we know that if they bring the queen out to f6, we have knight to d5, and we always have this escape square. Now again, be careful. The bishop attacks the queen here. Let's take the pawn, and now let's get the fork. Now here, what we can do is take the bishop with check, and now what we can do is bring out our knight. You can take the rook, but you can always remember you don't need to do it yet, because no matter what black plays, that rook will be hanging on the next move. So you don't have to play it just yet. We know what to do. You know the drill. Hopefully you guys are locked in your heads by now. d3 here, when the knight comes out, we know when the bishop develops to c5, f4 is the move. Now we bring our knight to f3. After black castles, we have a very interesting idea with f5, which puts a lot of pressure on black's position. We have this nice pin with bishop to g5, attacking their knight, And of course, if they attack us, we want to keep that pin on their knight, so we drop back. They attack our bishop instead, so we bring our bishop back. But we don't want to lose this bishop. The best move is to take with our knight. We don't mind that the b2 pawn is very weak, because we could just move the rook out of the way at any given point. And this pin on black's knight is much stronger. And you can see how the f5 pawn really kind of clamps down black's position. So let's see. Let's continue onwards. We know that this is d3. We know here is f4. And now we can bring our knight out. Their bishop has pinned our knight to our queen yet again. So remember, the best idea, because we want to castle, is to bring our knight to a4, attacking their bishop. They have tried to put more pressure on our knight, but we don't mind, because thanks for the bishop, bozo. Now we can play c3, and now we take with our pawn. And we don't mind, because we can always castle queenside. We don't mind that our pawn structure on our king side is severely hurt, because instead what we can do is bring our bishop to b5. We have a very nice center. You can see all these pawns in the center, and our king will be safe. We know the moves. You know them, hopefully by heart by now. d3 when the knight comes out, f4 when the bishop goes there, and now we develop our knight to f3. And with castles, remember the idea is f5, and now the same exact idea with bishop to g5. We bring our bishop back, and now the knight comes forward. But again, whenever the knight goes there, that's why our knight can go to f3 after that f4 pawn has been pushed. And now we can still do this idea. Again, we don't mind that the b2 pawn falls. We can attack that pinned knight, and that pin is very, very strong. We develop, and now remember, queen to g4. We can bring our queen back, and now we play knight e2. Remember, we don't want that knight going into d4. Now what we can do is this very nice idea with d3. The knight jumps in, but again, that's why we put our knight on e2. We take, and now we bring our knight forward to d5. This knight is very, very weak. We take back with the bishop, and we just drop back. And just like that, very pleasant position. We can easily develop our bishop. Black's king side is weak. They've made a lot of light square weaknesses around their king, and we have, yet again, a very nice position. We know the Vienna. We know what we're doing. You're an expert by now. Queen to g4, of course. Queen to f3, of course. And now, don't take the queen. What we want to do instead is activate our pieces. And we want to threaten that fork on c7. So we bring our knight to d5 to do that. We bring our knight out. And now the bishop drops back, protecting that pawn on c7. Now remember that nasty checkmate we had earlier, and we want to develop our dark squared bishop, so naturally the move is d3. Our opponent has brought forth their pawn, but what we can do is bring our bishop out and attack that bishop, because that bishop on b6 is very important to black's position. And if they play inaccurately, is we can take with our bishop, and their bishop has to take our knight, otherwise we would have had that fork. But now we take with the pawn, very important to take with the pawn, and attack their knight. Because now if they take back our bishop, we simply win a piece. Awesome. Let's go. We're so back. We're gaining elo. We're gaining elo today. Let's go. Alright, queen to f3. We know the move. And again, we don't take. We bring our knight forward. We bring our knight forward. We develop. We play d3. We play bishop to e3. If they take, well, thank you very much. Thanks for the free fork. We take the rook. Awesome. What we can do is just play the nice c3. This was an idea earlier. We don't want black to fork our pieces now. So c3 prevents the knight from ever going to c2. And we have a nice, comfortable position. Let's continue. We keep it moving and grooving. d3. Remember the knight? When the knight comes out, don't pre-move. Don't pre-move g4. Queen g4. d3. Now we know the move is f4. We can bring our knight to f3. And after this pin, we know we can attack their other bishop because we want to castle. They go for this. We don't care. In fact, we invite it. c3. Why not? Take it. We can take. The bishop drops back. Okay, so that's fine. We don't want to castle kingside. They can prevent us from castling kingside all they want. It won't matter. So we can bring our rook to the open file and attack their g7 pawn, which is very nice. And now this move is very bad. We can see that their weak pawn on e5 is very, very vulnerable. So we can attack both their knight and that pawn with rook to g5. If they take, congratulations, you're pretty bad at chess. Black, let's continue. All right, we know the move is d3, we know the move is f4, and we know the move is knight to f3. We know after this move, yet again, knight to a4. That's right, you want to get this bishop, take the bishop, that knight, kick that knight out, take it, same line, rook to g1. Now, if they protect the pawn, yet again, that e-pawn is very, very vulnerable because we can take. The knight has to move out of the way, but now we can attack their queen. And again, we have great development. Our king can castle queenside. That's the very nice thing about the Vienna as well, is that you can go queenside if your king side gets destroyed. And again, we have so many pawns in the center. We have so much central control that black is just absolutely toast. We've made it. This is the last line of this course. Let's do it. So we know the moves. We know when both bishops are out. All right, let's bring the queen to g4. And we know the move here is knight to d5 because we always have that escape square. Now this is the move I mentioned earlier where the king moves to f8. It's a very awkward looking move, but in some situations it can be good. We can bring our knight to h3 to attack the queen while developing it. Whenever the queen is in the middle like that and is surrounded by its pieces, we can look to trap it. But first, of course, our bishop is hanging, so we need to move our pawn forward to d3. Remember this move where the bishop attacks our queen. We don't have the move queen to g7 like we did before because the king protects it. But no worries, we can just bring our queen back and we are perfectly fine. You might look at this and think, okay, let's take back the bishop, and that's not a terrible move by any means. But in fact, we have better ideas because that king looks so juicy. So let's line up a rook on f1 with that square. The bishop goes back because otherwise we would have had potentially some checkmate threats. But you forgot about the queen. The queen is trapped in the middle of the board. If you enjoyed, consider checking out the other opening courses on Chess Reps because there's a lot to choose from with a lot more openings coming soon as well. Also, it's very important to remember all of the lines that were in this video. So if you'd like to do that, there's some awesome game modes with drill and time trial that are really fun and quick ways to just get into the action and remember each line. Click the link down below. Again, you can access all this content with a 7-day trial. So check it out. You might as well, because it could help you gain a lot of elo in chess. And if there's any other chess openings that you want me to do in a future video, let me know. Until then, see you next time.